Been a wonderful weekend, starting off into a beautiful Monday. So happy to really be focused on tangible, important areas of live streaming and LinkedIn. And that's why today we're at the LinkedIn strategy event. And, just talking to everybody, we're now capable after hundreds of shows that every show is an event. Every show is, I think, as qualitative as people who plan a whole month get together in a panel and share whatever they share because it's so interactive and you are the reason why we continue to make changes, right? We do watch what people say and hear, and we also look at numbers, and we're always trying to be relevant. So anyways, that's where we are. LinkedIn strategy event. I'm so happy to have Kelly and Harvey with us. Just as a note, Harvey's show follows this show every Tuesday. The franchise show, it's only getting better. So if you haven't seen it, you're catching it at a really good time. If you have seen it, you've already seen the progress that we're making. Kelly has the awesome journey with Christy Howard that follows Harvey's. And because we didn't have enough bread between all the layers, Carl's launching his show tomorrow at
Awesome.
10 a.m. Eastern. So you can go from 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 12 a.m., no, 12 p.m., and 1 p.m., and never leave a live stream with just the four of us, plus the four of us with us. And actually, I'll be Carl's first guest tomorrow. And I was just laughing with Kelly and Harvey before because I was Kelly's first guest, Harvey's first guest. So I feel kind of like the champagne bottle that they bang against the ship when they let it out of the harbor. So with that, chat's wide open. We really depend on chat to direct us, make us as relevant as we can. And this is the beginning of the show. And at the end of the show, it doesn't mean it should end. It should only expand. So we're accessible and open to anything anybody wants to share with us or any feedback we can get. With that, Kelly, what do you think?
Oh, sorry. I think I froze there for a second. Sorry. So, yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Happy Monday, everyone. And strategy, what a great thing to talk about, truly all the time, not just because it's January. Because truthfully, my thing is if you're in business and you don't already have your strategy set for this year, you're behind. But you can always readjust it. It is something that should be flexible and adaptable. Um, and I think, you know, I did do a post on this morning with just kind of the in-depth things about a strategy. I think a lot of times people can think a strategy is just, hey, we want to increase revenues by 2 times what we did last year, based on sales. And it's like, okay, well, that's a goal and a milestone. A strategy is how are you going to get there? What parts of your business need to be engaged or part of that strategy? And then tactically, how do you meet all of those things? Because, and we've talked about this a lot of times before. I've seen a lot of consultants over my career come into very large organizations and get paid a whole bunch of money to put together a strategy that the business already knew. It wasn't because it's not about the strategy itself, it's about true implementation. Because I think a lot of times businesses struggle to really recognize when do we hire? When have we pushed the limits too much on a lean team if we're a startup? Or just in tight times where we've had to cut back staff. Um, so I think it goes so much deeper than what people really think. And it truly is the part of business that I love because it's the puzzle. It's putting the puzzle together to figure out how to get to victory for everyone. And I think it's so important. And this came up in another post that someone just did this morning on data, because your data is so much part of the strategy to create the tactical path that you're going to take, because you can say we want to increase sales by 15% next year. Okay, well, what is that based on? If you're using a distribution channel that is almost fully saturated, that really is an unachievable goal based on what you have in place. And when you set your entire team or organization up for failure, because a lot of people do this, they throw something against the wall to see what sticks because it sounds good. Hey, we're going to increase because we're doing so great. But when you don't achieve it, it really takes the wind out of the sails of everyone. And it starts to have them feel like, why am I really going to try any harder? Because these aren't achievable goals. It's very important to set up achievable goals for your team because that creates the confidence to continue and honestly creates loyalty and all the things that you can't put a price tag on. So that's my very long-winded starting thoughts for this awesome topic.
Well, it seems so well thought out and presented. Have to give you credit for really putting it together so people can actually see and understand what we're doing. We're getting comments. I'm going to turn it over to Harvey though, because Harvey brings that extra balance to the show.
Well, I agreed with lots of things you said there, Kelly. I particularly liked the flexible and adaptable nature of a strategy. I think
So
when you talk there about a goal versus a strategy, your goal can be there, but how you get there is going to change depending on what happens along the way. Even if you set out in quarter 1 or wherever you start these things with a plan and a strategy, that has to change and be malleable along the way. I think another thing I think that was so relevant, and we've talked about it a lot, is doing versus planning as well. Just putting that foot in front of the other and taking that first step, I think it's the most vital part to any strategy or plan, is to do that. We've said that about our own shows, and I think it's absolutely the case with anything that you're looking to try and achieve. The most important thing is action. So I think that's it. I also like what you said about I'm just repeating what you've said because it was just very good, but I like what you said about it being a puzzle, because it is. There's lots of pieces to that puzzle to come together, to fit together. I think I'd like to add as well, and I had a conversation with someone today, and they just came up with a really interesting analogy. We often talk about gardening, but they talked about farming as an analogy for this, and I quite liked it in terms of the strategy, because farming, you plant a seed and you have to water it, and you have to make sure the soil's right, and you have to make sure that it gets enough sunlight, and you have to feed it, and then you get a crop at the end. But there's a lot of things between A and B. That return on that investment and that strategy is long. And I think that's what a lot of people don't necessarily realize. They expect, if I do this, what do I get here? And forget the steps in between. So I think it's important to realize it's part of a puzzle, and I like that one, and part of growing and nurturing something. And also, finally, the last part, and then we've got some lovely comments, so I'm gonna shut up in a minute. But the last thing I was going to say that I liked was the fact that it needs to be achievable as well. Again, if we take the analogy of growing something, a crop, there are only certain types of crop that you can choose for a particular country or location within a farm that are going to grow there. So it's got to be the right conditions, and it's got to be an achievable strategy to have. So there you go. That's my first thoughts. Let's turn it over to these lovely people.
Well, for sure. Well, we've got Minerva here. Minerva is just a wonderful lady that's been following and supporting our show, and I've had conversations with Minerva, so happy to see you. Here's a new gentleman I haven't really become familiar with. Thank you, Sagar. I'll stretch a little. Strategy for increasing revenue versus holding an existing clientele. Well, Harvey just said that I don't lose. Is I've always equated this to a garden, and building the garden the right way, nourishing it, watering it, taking care of it, and also keeping out all the things that could harm it, right? Like birds or whatever it is that you're dealing with. And I think to the point that there is a natural nature to success.
Yeah.
And there is a planting and a cultivating and a harvesting. But what I see is most people err on the side of planting too much, right? Just getting irrelevant connections and conversations and being focused on, to what Harvey said, the seed in which they want to grow from, right? And then cultivating it is building trust, and when you can build trust, then you can go to harvest. But the other thing is hardly anybody goes to harvest, because that's really monetization, whether you equate in dollars or thought leadership or whatever your goal is. If you don't achieve your goal, you haven't harvested, which means that you planted wrong or cultivated wrong, and in most cases didn't plant and didn't cultivate at all, hoping for a lottery ticket. But it is a puzzle. But here's what I'll say about the puzzle. As you get more and more pieces, the next piece comes faster and easier, and it's a bigger piece. Right in the beginning, you're just fumbling around with corners, trying to match things up if you're a jigsaw puzzle person. And I think here's the key: when you do it with 3 people who are doing their puzzle at the same time, you're tripling the amount of either insight or confirmation. Can't not remember Dennis. Agree, we need to be straight to get ahead, using our head towards success. And Dennis actually reached out on Saturday and says, I can't get on your show. And I said, because I'm not on weekends, and
that's a new strategy for 2024.
Oh, it's an excellent strategy, because here's what I'll tell you. I always talk about plan, do, review. And the planning has to come into the doing. Sometimes the doing doesn't come with the planning. That's the issue.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you got to review what you just did in order to plan what you're going to do. And by having the time between doing things, now you get a chance to get ready for what's coming up. So I would say that there's balance that everybody has to have. And the review process is just be self-accountable. Write down your hours. It's a week, right? Write down what you did on LinkedIn, how much you spent every day. And it can't be that much writing, right? How many times can you come here? 3, 4, 5 times.
You can voice for goodness sakes, or voice content for goodness sakes, which is much quicker.
Well, absolutely. And we're finding ways. But anyways, Carl's here. Carl's launching tomorrow. Can't be happier, because as Carl does, we do, because we feel we've taken some time and effort to kind of share what we're doing. And hopefully, and I'm pretty sure, because I know Carl, Kelly knows Carl, and Harvey knows Carl, he's a go-getter. He's going to have a great show. He's already entertaining and interesting. So this is another reason for this show, is for everybody who supports this show to check out Kelly's, Harvey's, Carl's. You might add a great channel to your weekly way of doing things and thinking. And sometimes maybe an extra voice may tilt you in the right direction. Beverly's here. Can't say enough about Beverly. Tuesdays. She's here every show. And now we've got some great people. Actually, Dr. Deborah Dupree is coming back this week. And I know Deborah talked to Beverly already between now and then. Here we've got Martin. And actually, Martin is a story. I've never met him. Good afternoon, Martin. He's from Europe. No, he's not from Europe. Maybe he is. But here's the thing. I invited him as a guest or as an invitation to the show with like 80 other people. And it shows that when you invite specific people who have a common interest, you'll build your audience, right? So I think that's a great tip. Tanya's here from South Africa, build sales funnels. Isn't it cool? You see a name, you know what they do and who they are. I mean, that's just terrific. Here we go with Beverly. Yes, awesome. Oh, we went there. Dennis, back to Dennis. Agree. Flexibility is a great strategy to be open-minded, to take action, to change and stay in shape and not hate to be too late. And, Dennis unless you've been in business 49 years, do you realize what change is all about? Because in order to stay in business that long, you probably had to reinvent yourself in your business about 8 times. If you figure every 5, 6 years, you got to get ready for the next wave. So, Dennis, just his support of the show and support, I know he's been to Harvey's show and Kelly's show, and I'm sure he'll visit Carl's show, adds so much more value than people can ever understand because he's co-seeding and co-cultivating and helping us harvest, right? So when you talk about harvest, you can't harvest it by yourself. If you build acres of corn or something, you'd need a community to come out and help you harvest that. And I think that's what we're trying to build is community. And when we talk about strategy, that should definitely be part of it. Why not get something that sticks? Good morning to all. Renadeb, great guy, always says the same 2 things. I wonder if you say it everywhere or just here. Good morning to all from my side. Wonderful to join today's session. Wonderful to have you. Minerva, one has to look around to see what drives the increase in the signals that open the mind to try new ideas. A review of what's in hand as opposed to what may be. An outcome is imperative. And, a review doesn't mean change. It just means, hey, I'll keep that in mind, right? If you see a trend, if you see something happen and it may not be big enough to make a big change. But, I'll say, walking the walk, when I made all these changes, which were about 3 of them, everyone turned out fantastic, right? So you can win on many counts if you're a little bit more aware of why you're making a change and what the change is hopefully going to bring. Minerva says inventory versus acquisition.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's wonderful. Minerva's actually been involved with the Canadian government most of her life and has been involved with helping laws and everything else. So just wanted to put a plug in for Minerva.
Nice.
Good morning, all strategy. They are great when they work, and when they don't, they really don't. Take a look at what areas of your life are working really well and model those strategies. A lot of times it's even easier to get around somebody who's already doing what you want to do, how you want to do it. And they say if you copy somebody, you'll be that person, right? If you want to be a great golfer, wake up every morning with that great golfer, and what do they do? And then what else do they do? I was always taught copy, don't invent. It's a lot easier. Agree, rebuild trust, not the rust. Renata, these things are, Kelly may never talk today again. A strategy is a plan, of course, of action designed to achieve a specific goal or set a goal. Renata says it involves making choices and allocating resources to accomplish objectives in a dynamic and competitive environment. And what I love about what Renata says in the conversation we're having today? It is action driven. It's not just feeling driven. It's not just attitude driven.
Yeah.
We're at a point that if we really are here or there or wherever to do something, let's do it.
Yeah.
Action with, a plan without action is a dream that's never going to be realized. Hi, Kelly and Harvey. Good, relevant topic. Renata, wow. Strategy provides individuals and an organization with a clear sense of direction. For sure. Yep. I think if anything, authenticity and transparency is so valued on LinkedIn because there's so little of it. Yeah. Because some people aren't capable of it, and some people don't think they'll sell enough that way. It takes too much time. It takes too much care and thought. And that's what separates a lot of the winners from the losers or the players. Need to make choice about how to allocate their time, individual skills, and then with proper strategy for sure. Carrie, if vegetables time for a joke. If vegetables go to the beach, you can catch them wearing a zucchini instead of zucchini. Okay, Dave is here. Dave's a great guy. If you don't know Dave, you should. Running marathons, just a real hero for a lot of heroes out there. And actually, we're going to be joined all together this week with Greg F. Martin on all 4 of us. I can't wait to see that. And, Dave has been making so many great changes based on a lot of what he's learning and doing And I think that's where you learn the most is the doing. Hello, great to see you. Renadeb. Strategies often involve a plan for adapting to change in the external environment. So right. Strategic framework provides a basis for decision making. Well, one thing I'll say again about Renadeb, he's breaking them up. So a lot of times people with 12 sentences, you only see half of them. So that is a good idea for everybody who wants to comment. Hello, great to see you, Minerva. Positioning is also a key element to consider for next move. Oh, look who's here, Danny, our good friend from England. Missed you, Danny. I have seen you with Harvey, and I always admire all the stuff you do because you're really methodical and thoughtful in your approach, and I think that's important. It's better to do it once right than keep doing it over again. Great to see you, Danny. Hope all's well. Dennis, thanks. If we are green, we are growing. If we are ripe, we are rotting. It must be Carrie. Okay. Here we go with Minerva. Thanks. Lovely plug. Unity is community for sure. Yeah. Why not? Why not lift each other up and all of us together as much as we can, right? It only comes back to you. Agree, play golf and learn, not just by putting around. Good point. Renadeb says strategy also involves assessing risk and developing plans to mitigate them. Strategy is key. If you don't know where you're going, you're probably already there. You three are heroes today. Great to hear and see you. Thank you, Dennis. What a wonderful gentleman. Danny's, thank you, Don. I have a clear strategy with my LinkedIn. Clear is where it's at. What you don't want to say is I have no visibility, don't know where I'm going. Here's one. Okay. And then Benjamin Pinto, glad to join. Don't know Benjamin, but now I do. Thank you for coming here. Well, that was quite a windfall.
Yeah.
So really, this thing is just blowing up today in a good way.
Yeah, because it's a great topic. So many things that I thought of while you all were saying that and through all these comments. One specifically that I want to be sure to touch on is that you were talking about basically threats, like what's threatening your strategy. And I think that's an important exercise to do is annually at several organizations that I've worked with. We all would do a year-end kind of wrap-up strategy report that was inclusive of a SWOT analysis. And I know a lot of people think that's old school, but SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, that does help you with a new strategy. You need to be able to look at all the things that are impacting where you're trying to go, which is inclusive of obstacles. Because obstacles, my opinion, they are just opportunities to be innovative when you don't have a solution that's already in place. And the other thing about cultivating, I mean, that's so important in planting seeds, because I couldn't help but think of, because I like strategy because it is putting a puzzle together and figuring not just the pieces out of what needs to be done for the organization, but also the players that are involved. And I always think of one person in particular, and I think we've all probably had this person in our career at some point, the person that takes credit for everybody else's work. Mm-hmm. And that used to drive me bonkers. But then it became part of my strategy about planting a seed, because knowing if he was on board with what we were thinking and he turned it into his own idea, like the goals are still the same. Who cares who? And let's be honest, most of the people knew that it wasn't him anyways, because everybody sees through that person. But understanding you're not at competition with the other people in the organization. You should be focusing on the goal. And I do wish that was a strategy somebody would have taught me when I was younger, because I took it personal. Because it really offended me and hurt my feelings. Like, oh, he's getting all the credit, but that was my idea, or I'm the one that did that. Because organizations don't care. There's no cabinet in the lobby that's got, hey, Kelly accomplished this and this year, and Harvey accomplished this and this year. It's just about that the organization accomplished this year. So I think that's just a good personal strategy, is to try to not take it personal, because it's not. Because the organization, just truthfully, they don't care about you. An organization doesn't have feelings. But in the adaptable and flexibility thing for me is always a key component. And I think the last thing I want to say this time around is I think it's also so important for whether it's the business owner, the CEO, or just C-suite staff, depending on the size of the organization, is having realistic expectations. Because speaking from a marketing perspective, I've had clients that think, hey, I need to increase my sales by this. I need you to come in and create a campaign, an email campaign in our existing CRM, and we want to see some results 30, 60, 90 days. And it's just kind of like, is that realistic? Being the fact of that your distribution channel, you have to create and show proof of a true relationship that usually takes 90 to 120 days to 6 months on average. So there's so many different variables, and people can have unrealistic expectations and also changing their strategy too often. It's one thing to be flexible and adaptable, but you don't want to change it over and over again, because you will just continue into this. You're in a spin cycle at that point, and you're not really going to gain traction, because that is kind of the strategy of let me throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And let's be honest, it rarely ever works, and it is a true waste of time and money, and it really exhausts the resources of your I kind of don't like this phrase, human capital, your staff, anybody who's working. It exhausts them because they get tired of spinning in circles too. And so be careful of that. So those are my thoughts this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really putting it together. We got great comments. We've got our own insights that we're sharing. And really the key to success is trusting yourself to trust yourself.
Yeah.
You know, is doing
And those
things
around
and
you,
knowing for sure, and knowing you have control, knowing you can approach something confidently, and how you feel is how you project, because this is all messaging. And
Yeah.
here's the other big key, and I'll swing it back to Harvey, is how are you being a disruptor,
Yeah.
right? How are you blowing things up and rebuilding them better? How are you the person going through the wall instead of waiting for someone to do it so you can walk through it after them? And I used to love when I was in e-commerce, just blowing everything up, taking stuff and just making everybody crazy. Because one thing is, give you an example, you could have one drill, let's say a power drill in Kansas. That person sets the price with the price they have, and now everybody's got to look at everybody else's price, even though
Yeah.
there's only one. So the key is what do you have, and what are you dissatisfied that you're at a plateau? And that's a good word when you're looking at strategy.
Mm-hmm.
To Kelly's point, when you go into a company and they want all this great stuff to happen in a short period of time, the question back should be how much change you're willing to take and how much are you want to risk, right? So I think it's all benefit and cost, and people need to review that in their strategy. Harvey, got some wonderful comments here.
Wow, I've just been listening and learning and watching. I just wanted to quickly say hello to everybody that's here as well, and particularly new people that joined us today. I was just looking at Benjamin's LinkedIn profile there, all about hot tubs, which makes me think of like summer and lazing about a hot tub, which is nice. But I actually
want right now.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to pick up on something that Benjamin said, which was change comes from challenge. And
Yeah.
I like that one.
I do too.
It made me think about a few things. It made me think about also a phrase which is similar, which is that opportunity rarely comes from a place of comfort as well. And it also made me think about evolution. And when you think about how plants or creatures evolve, they adapt and change normally based on threats and competition in their environment. Yeah. That's how they normally improve and adapt to their surroundings. So I do like the fact that we need to embrace challenges and failures as part of that strategy, and not think of those as negative things. So
I want to interject something here with that, Harvey, because I don't know why this made me think of it right when you were saying that. But on your show last week, the gentleman you had on, and forgive me for not recalling his name.
Kurt Sauls.
Yeah, and he works Subway franchises.
That's right.
And his strategy was so different, but it was, and I don't want to say, but it was simple because he was just thinking outside of the box. And I think that's something we can all get into, right, with our own strategy, is we get stuck in a lane and we forget to take a step back and look at it from a fresh perspective. Hey, we've always done it this way, but how can we do it different? Because him doing like the ad coupons upside down because it gained attention was freaking brilliant. And I look back to some of the things I did when I was younger, and I'm like, man, I can't believe that I did that. But it's because there's usually no fear. We're so trying to either prove ourselves or just excited about, oh my God, I totally think of this, because we're not stuck in the lane of seeing a strategy in a certain way that's put blinders on us. Because after we've been doing something for so long, we can tend to get blocked because we're so used to what works, what changes. And those are sometimes when you do want to have a strategy where you're bringing in an outside consultant or somebody else to say like, hey, we need a fresh perspective because we're just kind of stuck in our ways. Or just taking a step back and thinking of it different with your team, depending on the situation. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but I just thought of that because I thought that was such a brilliant thing that he did. And so seemingly simple, but it made him stand out and differentiate from his competition.
Well, absolutely. No, I'm pleased you interjected because I think that's absolutely a relevant and a brilliant idea as well. Yeah, you were saying there earlier as well about sometimes where you've worked with people where you've had to they're either take your ideas,
Yes.
or I remember once having to work with somebody where I had to create a situation where I made it their idea. And
Yes.
they weren't aware about it. Then they
Easy.
came up with it. Then I had to agree with it.
Yes.
But I had to do it also whilst trying to add value myself. And it was an impossible situation. But I mean, that just reminded me of that. But what I think being sort of open to fresh perspectives, I think that this is a really interesting way to go in this conversation. You know, we were joking about golf, and I'm terrible at golf. I do try and play it. But one of the things that and one of the reasons I think business was done playing golf is because walking and talking is quite often a good way to have a conversation with somebody.
Yep.
I know a chap here who's in the franchising industry, a chap called Amrit, and he takes his employees for a walk, a 10K walk together, rather than sitting in a boardroom. And I think I remember you, Kelly, saying you used to take your team out of that environment.
Yep.
And just doing something that's a little bit unexpected, those upside down printed things, it just it sort of disrupts the pattern of thought and makes you stop and think about it a little bit more. You know, I just love this sort of fresh perspective and thinking about it from a new angle. You know, I was with a franchisee today, and they were asking if we were the sort of business that take in new ideas. And I said, absolutely, we are. And he came up with an idea there and then for a section of the business, which sounded brilliant. And, you know, I think if you're blinkered and you have a strategy that isn't flexible, as we said at the beginning, you've got to be open to new ideas and do things different ways. You know, go back to sort of farming. You know, you've got to plant different crops, and some are quicker to grow. I was talking to someone recently. This reminds me, bamboo, and I had no idea about bamboo. But if you grow bamboo, you put it in the ground. You have to water it for 5 years, and nothing comes out the ground. But you keep watering it. And then you need a shoe to come out the ground. And then within a year, it'll be a strong bamboo and it'll be 20 foot tall. But it grows very quickly once it does. But you have to put all of this effort and energy into that strategy without seeing a result. Whereas you get some crops that you'll put in the ground and you'll see a result within 2 weeks. So I think it's having that sort of mixture of strategies, some
Yes.
that are longer and produce a stronger and a taller crop, and some that are quicker and can produce a more instant result. So I quite like the gardening theme here.
Yeah, that's remarkable because what it says is it's expectation that you're fighting, right? If you planted bamboo and in 6 months nothing happened, you think something was wrong. But if you know it's going to take 5 years, that's part of your strategy is patience, or don't go to that, uh, that plant. And I think what we're bringing today through our strategy show is the why. Why would you want to change? Well, if you looked at it this way, and the other thing I always do, because I spent my whole life strategically, uh, and was to fast forward. Okay, so you're doing this and you're getting this. Fast forward, where are you going to be in 90 days? What's going to change? If you're on a fast track and the growth is there, yeah, it looks like this thing could be a home run. But if it's like, oh, this is a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of trouble, and it's so uninnovative, it's so undistinguishing or differentiating. In this world, you got to stand out, and you got to stand out large in a good way, which is what is your value proposition? That should always be the foundation to your strategy, is how much value can you bring, to Harvey's point, in what short period of time that is more cost and time efficient than what they're doing. So if we're figuring out a puzzle, why don't we already figure out the puzzle that everybody's playing and share it with them to say, here's where you fit in. That's where an audit or review would come in.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what you could do to optimize it with this. And the cost and the time is incredibly beneficial. And I think that's what people want to know is give me the facts, A and B. Here's where you are. Here's what you could be. Why do you change something? Because it's more beneficial or efficient. If not, there's no purpose. But let's get to comments. I don't know where I left off. Okay, don't take anything too personally, for sure. Tanya, often the foundation phase is the hardest and takes the longest. Well, it's also takes you the longest to figure out what the foundation is and what's required. And you got to characterize this. I mean, doctors go to school for 8 to 10 years, and then they leave school with $500,000 in student debt before they made their first dollar. But somehow it all works out over time. And that's the key, is do you have the time? And if you don't, what's taking that time away from you? If you have to make money for things that don't fortify you, then switch them out. And I think that's why a lot of people went home during the pandemic, found out it was cheaper not to work after they figured out daycare and transportation and everything else. And they made themselves a simpler, easier life. And I think simpler and easier in the beginning is necessary, because you're not going to get a lot of stuff tangible. So why not look at it like education? Like, I'm going to put a year or two into study and figuring out this puzzle and get some study mates, right? How do people usually get through classes? They meet afterwards and they get together and they share what they're knowing and what they're learning. So Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, so many things. Just in what you were saying right there, I mean, and to reiterate, Harvey said this earlier too, about the different strategies within your overall strategy, because there are short-term and long-term of what you have to go through. But what I was thinking as you were both talking as well is there also has to be a strategy for your team. And this is probably at the top of my mind because I've got a leadership top voice, so I always get asked questions about it. And one of them, or many of them, are about your team and doing reviews and such. And my strategy with my team was always, because we would do, like you mentioned, Harvey, walking meetings where we would go down to our coffee shop and sit outside. on an occasion or go to lunch or what have you. But I met with my team regularly. They always knew where they stood. And so whenever annual reviews or quarterly reviews is when we did them in most all the organizations I was in, as time consuming as they were, which sometimes I did not like, but my team always knew where they were. They never sat in their review and were like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is where I'm at. Because I always resented that. What do you mean you called someone in and told them that they're like below expectation? That to me is your fault as a manager. Like you have failed, not the employee, because they should have known that along the way. Like when did they fail? How did they fail? Or not meet expectations. I don't even want to say fail. And then conversely with that, talking about when, the higher ups on an occasion, and this happens in marketing a lot, is you have to be able to manage up. You can't be afraid to tell them, hey, your expectation of this project being completed in this time frame, I want to show you why this isn't possible and back it up with data. Because otherwise it just sounds like you're bitching. But you need to be able to do that. And that is part of your own strategy to your relationship within the organization. You can't be afraid to tell the CEO, like, hey, I appreciate what you're trying to accomplish. However, after going through and really looking into this, this is more of the critical path that would be an acceptable and achievable solution. And I guarantee you every time it works, because I never had a CEO, well, I shouldn't say never. I did have a CEO say, I don't care what you have to do. You need to have it done by this day, period. Which is ridiculous. Because again, that's just hurting your team. Because when you exhaust your team and continue to stress them out, that's when people start dropping off. So I think strategy also, it goes so many layers down for, the organization as your position and or department, your team. And then I think even one step further, it's for ourselves. What's the strategy that you have for you? How are you going to approach every day? Like Don, I know that you walk every morning to start with. That's a daily strategy that you have for yourself. And those too should be adaptable and flexible, because, there was certainly a time in my career where I was working all the time, and I loved it. However, it was burning me out, because you will burn out. And then when you burn out, it's a hard crash and burn. It's not subtle. It's like you suddenly drop off the cliff and you just don't have any more, it's a shame. But a lot of organizations will push you until you say no. And you do have to learn, again, part of your personal strategy is I had to learn to set boundaries, because just because I'm a C-suite staff does not mean that I work 24/7. And I would flat out say, hey, unless it's an emergency on a Saturday, I'm not going to answer anything that you send me until Monday. And Sundays, I am off the grid, period. Again, unless it's life and death, but we weren't curing cancer, so there would be no reason for anyone to do so. But you have to be the one to set those boundaries, because otherwise, if you answer all the time, and I saw this with other employees, I mean, they were getting text messages at 2 a.m. on the weekends and, 5 a.m. in the morning. And it's like, you've got to set boundaries for how you allow people to treat you, because that's not okay. Because when you do pull, even if you're making good money, you pull back how many hours you put in. And I did do that one time. And I was like, ooh, I've so got to pull back on how many hours I'm working a week, because you're not making that much. And it's not worth the sacrifice of your own mental health. You have to take a break. You're not efficient when you work that many hours. And I'm getting off my self-help soapbox on that one, but you've got to take care of you to be the best in all of those other strategies that you're trying to implement.
Well, and only you know what you need when you need it and how you feel when you feel it. And if you don't get back into the garage and refuel and get ready for the next race, you're not going to be around for many races. And then what does that mean? So again, there's a balance there. And then we haven't talked about happiness in your strategy. right? How happy is this going to make you doing it every day? Because the only thing that's going to go over lack of return is passion, right? If you're passionate about something, if you love it, and you're willing to do it for as long as it takes for you to be good enough for it. No
Yeah.
one cares what you need or want. No one asks you about your time frame. They ask you about your value proposition. What are you going to market with today? And if you put a lot of thought and a lot of care, and are you, and it's even more important, the personality. People are so isolated, they're so insulated, they're so stigmatized by stuff that someone who just slows everything down makes people understand it doesn't have to be a hard, push. It just needs to be a methodical strategy that people follow. But before I swing it back, I got a story about Sarah. Never met Sarah again. Brand new person, but she wrote me or messaged me 10 minutes ago saying, I signed on to be invited and I can't find a way. And I just shared for everybody, you can always go to one's LinkedIn profile background and join there. And if that doesn't work, you can go to someone's YouTube channel and join there. Or what Sarah did was reach out and say, how do I get in? Agree that feedback should be part of organic ways of working, managing up or your team, not a nasty surprise at Xmas, LOL. And here's one thing I'll add to what Kelly mentioned. I was always involved in hiring everybody in the companies that I had. And the reason for that is I wanted understandings that later on I could go back to and say, remember when we interviewed, and one of the main things, one of my main interests or priorities was being a good citizen here or something. Well, that's the difference when you have to bring some remedial attention to something. And the other thing I always said is be friendly. You don't have to be friends because sometimes you have to say goodbye to people. I said, and you lose authority if everybody feels like, there's no way that person's going to do that to me. So I think it's communication. And I was fortunate. I always had my daughter for the last 8 years of the business being the HR director. And she was always great at celebration, at recognition. She was out at Starbucks buying gift cards like crazy, and she just passed them out like crazy. Good job, good this. And then I would take everybody to lunch every day of the week. So I would say who in the company, because we had everybody, 72 people under one roof at one time. And I take 3 warehouse guys or 3 office gals and, to a nice restaurant, and we share what's going on in the office, what's going on that we can all talk about. And, some of these people never ate out. I saw them brown bagging it every day. And I know how difficult it was for some people. And just to be taken to a nice restaurant and being, asked what's going on, what is this? Because you never get to those big, difficult conversations if you continue to have small, friendly conversations. Because there's all kinds of opportunities then for someone to bring it up. Dennis says, agree, we should never say never. Christy is here, one of our favorite people. With the Awesome Journey, Tuesdays, 1:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Having a strategy, both personally and professionally, is how you become balanced, and continuous conversations without silence hurt you as well as the person you're working with or having a relationship with. That's so true, because if you're not willing to talk to somebody, you don't trust that person, or you don't honor that person. You take that person for granted, right? Or they become a commodity in some places, where you're only as good as what you do every day. And if you don't do that tomorrow, well, there's not a lot of loyalty. Carl's here. Carl says, I'm developing a strategy for my community. See, Carl's always a couple steps ahead. He's already thinking not about his show, but about the community for his show, which means me and Kelly and Harvey will get all these inside tips from Carl and speed up our process of the people who support me and who I support. This is global, entire community, as well as each individual relationship. Yeah, and there's always people getting on the bus, and there's people going to be getting off the bus. And that's what's so important, to work with the people while they're here, don't take anybody for granted, and you might make the difference in them staying a little longer and being successful. Dennis says burnout is not as bad as burning down, for sure. Sarah's got a long one. Conflict like challenge, I think, provides great growth opportunities, and growth, it's not always conflict, but it's communicating, means it's ongoing. Linda's here. Linda's always one of our favorites. Another strategy booming is self-care, and many needed it like me. Well-care to build bodies without the side effects, creating new ones, and I'm offering more options too. Dennis says, agree, the old motivating saying, do what you love and the money will follow. And if it doesn't, you still did what you loved and didn't really lose. And here's Tarek, a new name and an interesting emoji. So Harvey.
Oh, wow. Again, amazing thoughts. I always get so much from these conversations because, genuinely come to these conversations with no thought as to where it's going to go. And I just love hearing everybody's thoughts. And there's so many new perspectives today. I think I was thinking about what we said about foundations and growing and having a strong foundation, I think. And I think that it's really important because you need quite a lot of patience sometimes with a strategy. We talked about bamboo. In fact, what time is it? What time is it, Don?
Drop time.
Drum roll, please.
And you know what? Today, it's been so good today. There's been so many, the conversation's gone in so many different and interesting ways that I had all these different things that I was thinking of, but I'm going to choose this one. I don't think I've chosen this one before. Right. So this, right, and you may not be able to see this. Oh, look, you can see a reflection of everybody. But this is my dad's membership of the Royal Architecture School. So he studied to be an architect. And you may not know this, but it takes longer to be an architect than it does to be a doctor. So he was at university and college for 7 years to be an architect. But the reason that I like this about my dad is because he worked very hard and was determined to get that. But what I like about the architecture thing is then he built things afterwards. He built many different things afterwards. And the other thing is he had flexibility in his job because he wasn't just an architect. When times were tough, he sold picture frames and he had all sorts of other businesses. So I think be patient, have a strong foundation and remain flexible. And it's a nod to my late dad.
That's wonderful, and that's a legacy that continues today. And your dad, I'm sure, provided so much value with his buildings and his plans. And, I mean, he was probably at the front end of the strategy side because you got to design and engineer something before you can actually put it out there and make it work. And I think everybody can look back and say, who built their foundation? Who allowed them to have strategies and influenced your strategies in ways you'll never know, right? Because you don't take account of everybody's word when you're growing up and what they say, but it does mean something and it does fit in somewhere. And, in that way, no one ever dies. It just moves forward with the person who they shared with. And I think that's the beauty of this platform is how many people, I mean, Sarah's from, let me just check,
She's from the UK.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And, it's so funny how we're getting so many UK people, but I also think that just like when we were having Ambambola, like half of Nigeria was here, because they followed Ambambola or whatever. And as you get more people from the UK, you're going to get more UK people. So, we're spreading this word. And you're right, Harvey. These conversations are getting so good because we're so good at having these conversations over so many conversations. I mean, me and Kelly are probably up to 100 of these. And when you know somebody so well, all of that stuff goes away. Now you can get into the nitty gritty. When you're with a stranger and you don't know how they're going to respond, you're a little bit more careful maybe. You don't move as quickly. But when you're with a fun group of friends, you can't wait to run. You can't wait to explode into something and try something new, because it's the discovery, it's the experience, right? When the journey's over, you never remember where you ended up. You always remember what it took to get there. And the tougher the beginning is, the more rewarding the end becomes. When you look back and say, I almost quit. I almost was at this point, but I moved forward. I didn't let it stop me. And then I created this idea, because they say necessity is the mother of invention. When you come to a blockage in the road, you know you can't go through it, right? So either you go under it, over it, or around it. And that's where the strategies come in. When it's clear sailing, the only strategy you got to have is don't screw it up. It's when you hit a rut that it makes all the difference. Linda says, agree. Live the conversation and perspectives too. Well, that's the fun of it. Did you ever get a toy and you decide, unless you're a collector, never to take it out of the box and play with it? Most kids just throw the wrapping away, throw the box away, throw the directions away, and they just want to get right into it. And I think Harvey made a great point along with Kelly. You got to give it its own natural time, and then do yourself a favor, add some extra to it. Everything that I learned in business is always going to take longer and cost more, whatever the numbers are. Add to them for the surprises and everything else you didn't factor in. And then you're okay. And maybe once in a while you hit it and you found out you got there early and cheaper. Kelly.
Yeah, well, I mean, so many things I could say to wrap up. But I think where I want to go back to is it's just like, community is where you feel safe and supported, and you're more apt to take risk because you feel safe and supported. That's the same thing in an organization or a business or within a strategy. When people feel safe and supported, they're more apt to try something that they wouldn't have likely tried before, and get more creative and get more outside of the box because they trust the space, and will go way beyond, because sometimes the craziest things that get thrown on the table as an idea are the ones that lead to the most amazing destinations that then create a strategy to make that come. So a strategy to create a community feel within your team, your organization, what have you, where they are feeling safe, supported, and that trust is key. Because you want to go to those people, and like you said earlier, Dawn, is if we can go somewhere to people that we trust, that know that they can speed up a strategy for us, why wouldn't you? Like that's a strategy. Hey, I know that I need to, example, add a LinkedIn live stream to my marketing and or business strategy. How am I going to do that? I'm going to reach out to people that do it all the time, because they're the ones that know and have done it and know all the quirks and the behind the scenes. Because the three of us just dove in. I mean, let's just be honest with that. We didn't know what the heck we were doing, really. We just went for it and have figured it out on this other side. But now are, definitely are strategizing based on what we've learned. But not everybody has the time to learn, like you were saying, to spend that time to build. Like they need to get to certain results maybe a little bit quicker. Well, the best way to do that is go somewhere where a foundation has already been set and be like, hey, I want this. Help me out. So super great word today. I do think we could talk about it for hours and hours as per usual. But super fun. Love it. Great way to start the week. Everybody needs to take a look at it. And I think there was a load of good takeaways today. So thank you for having me. And yeah, so those are my ending thoughts for today.
Well, those are beautiful thoughts, ending, beginning, or middle thoughts. And Harvey, I mean, it's always great to have you as part of the trio. I feel like we do harmonize really well, and anybody could take the show for 40 minutes and go with it and still have a great show, let alone the three of us, can't wait to get in with something. And what's also nice is the experiences that come to mind, like your father's architectural education and practice would have never happened, right? If you were watching TV or talking to somebody about something else. And it's like anything that brings things up that were really fun, worthwhile, makes you feel good is worth doing, right? And you should use that as a comparison to what was the alternative to that if I didn't do that. And what could be the alternative is even the better question. And, to Kelly's point, we just dived in. But, when you have a background of just diving in and knowing what that means, that's important, right? All you have to know is enough to know what you need to do next and have the time and thought and the openness to make those changes. So, Harvey, final thoughts?
Well, final thoughts. I'm going to end with another prop. So it's a 2 for the price.
Oh, wow, a double header.
2 for Monday. Love it.
There you go. Look, it had to be some of these. Some seeds.
Oh,
Nice.
But
well played. Well played.
I think the thing with these seeds, right, is you mentioned this earlier, Don, about the fact that people on LinkedIn and in business tend to plant a lot of seeds, and that's what they do. But if you take even this packet of seeds, when you look on the back, it says when you're meant to plant them. It says where you're meant to plant them, how you're meant to plant them, what you're meant to do to care for them, when the flowers are going to come up. And it also even says this: contents may vary from illustration. And so it's even saying you can expect something slightly different from the seeds. So I'm going to end with continue to plant seeds, but be careful where you plant them and make sure you look after them.
that's beautiful. If you can't remember anything, think of seeds, planting, cultivating, and harvesting. And you are the biggest blossom in your life and in so many other people's lives that you deserve to flourish. You deserve to grow as big and as strong as you can and help others do that. And that even gives you the double benefit. Winning is great, but winning together is something. I mean, I was watching football this weekend and you see these teams and these young men, in their 20s typically, and they come together and they know each other so well, that when they go to play, they could take on anything. That's the winners. It was never the most talented. It was the most driven, the most people that just wouldn't quit, wouldn't give up, and kept believing. And I think that's where belief is so important. So, Kelly, you do have the final word.
Oh my goodness. I thought I did have the final word. So I guess on all of that, I love the new format. Would love to hear what people think about it, because it did come up at the very beginning that the show is not on the weekends any longer. Don has earned a break after 700 and some shows. So Monday through Friday, and focusing on other broader topics to bring you into the conversation. So we would love to know your thoughts. And like I always have ended before, and I guess I will continue to now, it's Monday. So go out and any day go out and shine so bright that others can't help but shine too.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Harvey. Thank you, audience. Makes me just can't wait for Mondays, to be honest with you, to get everything rolling, to be back with my best friends here. So enjoy your day, do some strategizing, but more importantly, do some acting on the strategy and come back. Next week, we'll have the strategy event again. So these events continue because, like Kelly said, we could take another 10 hours, and we will, but it'll take us 10 weeks to get to it. Take care, and we'll talk some more. Bye for now.